Yes, we're heading back down under, Chamberlain back again. So look at back to the tractors, whether it's a twin engine, Detroit powered 671, 480 horsepower, custom built 18-ton monster like this one here, or whether it's a more familiar looking 49 in its very distinctive looking colours. The 4090 in its very distinctive looking colours, or it's the earlier Super 70, also Detroit powered, built between 1954 and 1963. Chamberlain certainly had a tractor for every farmer down under. So yeah, finally we're back to the Chamberlain video. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. A little bit later with this video than I had planned on being, but when I went researching Chamberlain tractors, I actually realised that I knew absolutely nothing about the tractors themselves. Well, very little. My first introduction to Chamberlain tractors, I did see one back in 2000 when I was down in Australia for a year, and I remember seeing this green, familiar looking, odd looking, what I thought was a John Deere 46 or 4850, and when I went over it looked a bit closer and I seen it was a Chamberlain. Back then I probably didn't know what a Chamberlain tractor was and I didn't pay it much attention. But having watched Bundy Bear's Shed over the last few years, Chamberlain gets plenty of mentions. So it re-sparked my interest and I went looking about them. Researching for this video, yeah, there's a lot of models, there's a lot of crossover, and there's obviously the shift then in the middle from when Chamberlain became Chamberlain to basically becoming John Deere. Towards the end, the 70s and 80s. So yeah, look, we'll start where we left off in part one. So look, we'll start with the first tractor. The first Chamberlain tractor produced was the Model 40K that we had spoke about before, which is 40 horsepower, 30 kilowatt. It was twin cylinder, horizontally opposed engine, weighed about 4 tons and was considered to be ideal for Australian farmers. In 1953 then Chamberlain started to produce diesel powered tractors such as the GM diesel powered 60DA or the later 70DA, as well as the 55DA, which was powered by Australian built diesel engines. Good, strong, big, torquey engines for pulling large implements up and down the field, and that's what they were designed for. That's what they were perfect for. These tractors were not for tipping around a little yard, feeding cattle and stuff. These were big tractors. So yeah, a few years later, the production of kerosene powered tractors was stopped. And in 1955, Chamberlain developed the Perkins diesel powered, the Champion models, which went on to be wildly popular for them. And of course, with the publicity stunt, in the same year, Chamberlain entered a new diesel-powered tractor in and around Australia, the Red X Trial, as a recovery vehicle. Now, we had spoke about this tractor before, as we know it went on to become the famous Tail End Charlie. The tractor in question was fitted with a modified cab, bench seat, high-speed gears, allowing it to reach up to 110 kilometers an hour. Initial attempts to enter the event were met with disbelief, and it was only officially recognised as a recovery vehicle for one leg of the trial. Tail End Charlie, however, is reputed to have completed one stage in the trial while towing as many as 6 other entrants that broke down on the way. In the subsequent trial, the powers that be relented, and the Chamberlain machine completed the whole course. In subsequent years, Chamberlain produced a range of iconic larger tractors suited to broadland farming in Australia. So the big plains, the big wheat belt, that's what Chamberlain tractors were built for. These tractors are now popular for heritage tractor pulling contests and feature their own national championships. So an expansion and retrofit of the Welshpool plant. We spoke in length about the Welshpool plant in our part 1 of the Chamberlain series. So anyone that hasn't seen part 1, I would advise you to go back and look at part 1. We talk about setting up of the company, setting up of the factory in Welshpool and the roots behind the actual company itself. So the Welshpool manufacturing site was redeveloped and a new office complex was built in 1982. However, by 1986, due to significant decline in demand and of course the buyout, the manufacture of the famous Chamberlain tractors ceased. Now, we look down through the range of tractors. Now, I will ask us to please forgive me because I think I've only ever seen 1 or 2 of these tractors. Everything that I've seen has been online, or I have looked it up myself. I have researched various different websites. I've got some great information of people who actually watch the channel, and I have a note from one of them here that I'm going to read out later on. Some brilliant information. that you wouldn't find online. So it's not like where I know other models off the top of my head. I had to really research and get my head around what each series was, what model was, what they did, what they were used for. So we'll start off with the Champion series. This would have followed on. So the Champion series would have been introduced in 1955, and this was a general purpose tractor. So we'll start with the smaller one, the Champion 6G, which was 57 horsepower, was powered by a Perkins L4 engine. So yeah, Perkins obviously in the whole Champion series, Perkins powered them all. So then the Champion 9G was the next model up after that. So an increase in horsepower up to 62 horsepower, 1958 to 1966, and it was powered by a Perkins 4-cylinder 270 engine, so 270 cubic inches. And there was over 8,000 of those tractors made. So yeah, very, very popular tractor in the Champion series, in the whole range of tractors. So then when you look at the 306 model, the 306 model was 70 horsepower. So it was built it had a 3 or 4 year run from 1966 to 1969, and it was powered by the Perkins 6-cylinder 306 engine. So it was roughly 70 horsepower. Now this 306 engine, from the research and a little bit of information that I've been given, I can't find it being used in any other tractor, any other machine, in any other application. Not that I can find. Generally these Perkins engines are used in marine or ships, or they're used in generators, but I can't find another application for this 306 engine. But what I can find is that basically the 306 was a smaller version, narrower bore of the famous 354 engine that we'll talk about in a minute. So the 306 then was 70 horsepower then, and it was followed on then by the C670, 70 horsepower, had the exact same engine. Really the only difference in these tractors was pretty much was the colour. Now there was a few changes, but I just want to add on something here on this model, on the 306, and a few other little bits of information that have been given from one of my viewers down in Australia, Jeff the Aussie, he called himself on YouTube. So thanks a million, Jeff, if you're watching. Thanks for that fantastic information that you sent in. Now, I take it from what you've written in the comment section that I assume you worked for Chamberlain. You're involved with them in some way. So Jeff Rowe, so the 306, built from 1966 to 1965. So that would include the 306 and the C670, which are basically the same tractor. Built from 1966 to 1975, nearly 9,000 of them. So it started off the 306 and became the C670, which was basically the same tractor painted yellow, with 9.0 by 16 front wheels in it. So the 70 horsepower 6-cylinder 306 motor, which he has never been seen used in anything else either. So it was basically, as we said, a smaller version of the 354 engine, which had a smaller bore, and he would describe it as being a lovely, sweet sounding motor, which gave very good service. Now, I have seen loads of 354 engines in various machines. As we know, Massey Ferguson, the 1200 that we spoke about only last week, has a 354, loads of combine. So it was a fantastic engine. So the 306 just basically a smaller version of it. So basically tidy up, sweet sounding motor, good service. So tidy up in the 9G with a better motor, but with slightly lower diff ratio and an 18.4 by 30 rear wheels instead of 18.4 by 28. And it lost the road speed because of the ratios in the diff. Very popular tractor. The 9Gs, the 306, and some C670s, and their 100 horsepower big brothers, the Countryman 6, the Countryman 354, and the C6100, were driven from the depot in Sydney to their respective dealers in New South Wales instead of going on the train. The delivery run for the new 9G was 250 miles, mainly on dirt road. This was done rain, hail or shine, and was possible because of the good road speed of 30 miles per hour. Sometimes they pulled a 14 disc plough too when they were heading off for delivery. So that came from Jeff. Yeah, thanks a million for that. That's a super bit of information to think that they got out when they, to us now, 250 miles is 400 kilometres. That's a fair drive. I'm sure there was an overnight stay or two involved in that drive, and maybe a few beers along the way as well to make it worth your while. But yeah, fantastic stuff. Yeah, so moving on from that then, the bigger series, the Countryman series, which would be described as a broad acre cultivator tractor. So this is what was out on the wheat belt, out in the large open fields, pulling massive cultivators up and down to prepare the ground for seeding, and of course they were used for seeding as well. So starting off, the Countryman 76 horsepower, 1958 to 1962, and was powered by a 5.2 Meadows engine. The Countryman 6 then was 76 horsepower, and it was built, production run from 1963 to 1966, and this was powered by the famous Perkins 6354 engine that anyone that's worked on tractors or anything down through the years will know this engine very well. Fantastic, reliable machine, used for industrial applications, used for marine, on ships, and generators, combine harvesters, Massey Ferguson tractors, obviously. So moving on from that then, the bigger version, the Countryman 354 was 92 horsepower. Now I'm assuming this has the 354 engine as well. I'm assuming that this engine was turbocharged. I just didn't take note of that when I was doing my research, but it was the same engine, but obviously it's almost 20 horsepower more. So I'm assuming this was a turbocharged version of the Countryman 6. And then moving on from that, then the last in the Countryman series was the C6100 at 101 horsepower. And again, 1970 to 1976 was the production run, and it too had the C354 engine. So I will look up, I'm not sure, I might drop a note in the comment, or if somebody wants to help me out, the difference in those. I assume the bigger horsepower ones were turbocharged. Yeah, so that was the Countryman series. Obviously, we know what they were used for. These are big lumps of tractors, powerful at the time. Now you'd be laughing if you were seeing going up and down a field with 70 horsepower behind you, pulling a wide cultivator. But at the time, these things were ideal for that. Moving on then, the next in the lineup we're going back years again a little bit, from 1954 to 1963. So the Super 70. So the Super 70 was a 3.5 litre, 3-cylinder, Detroit powered, 72 horsepower. And there was just over 1,000 of these machines built. And it's slightly bigger brother, the Super 90, which was built from 1962 to 1967. And it too had the 3.5 3-cylinder. Now this is listed as the GM engine, but GM had bought out Detroit, so these would be the same engines. And 803 of those were built. So these were, they were a very popular tractor as well, obviously. So yeah, that is it for that lineup. Now we move on from that. We're getting into, I don't know how it's taken down under. I suppose we're getting into the John Deere era then. When we head into the 70s, things start to take a little bit more of a familiar look about them to anybody from, let's say, north of the equator, I suppose. Yeah, so moving on then to the 70s. So into 1974, 75, was the introduction of the 80 series. Now you look at the 80 series and you immediately know where the influences came from. Gone is the big front grille that we're used to seeing on the Countryman and the Champion models. That very distinctive look and that distinctive look of Chamberlain about them. So now we have the John Deere influence. When John Deere came and stepped in and bought 49% of the company. The 80 series then, 4080, the 4080 was the first of them. 85 horsepower, built from 1975 to 1985, and I had a very famous John Deere 5.4 litre engine. So that engine would be very popular in Europe and in America. It would have been seen in the likes of the John Deere 3130s, and that would have been a good, reliable engine. that in the 4080 it would have been non-turboed. So there was almost 2,500 of those models made. So yeah, popular model, and a good production run of 10 years. So that, and it was a great engine, and it would have had the 12-speed partial power shift. So it would have had 1, 2, 3, and then high low in 2 different ranges. And I think all of the 80 series would have had that transmission as well. So the 4280 then was the bigger brother of that again. So it had the 111 horsepower John Deere 5.9 litre, so the 5.9 litre engine, which we would be used to seeing in the likes of the 3140 and the 3640 over here in Europe and in America, and that the 40 series would have had the 5.9. The 6 cylinders would have had that 5.9 litre engine. Again, a fantastic engine once it was looked after. So that was a non-turbo version in the 4280. The 4480 then again had the same engine, but it was turbocharged. So the 5.9 litre engine, 131 horsepower. So you're up to, the likes of your 3650 nearly power range at that stage. 130 horsepower. There was, 2,270 of those made. The 4280, then there was nearly 2,200. So of the whole 80 series, you're looking at 7,000 tractors. It's a lot for some place like Australia. So the 90 series then, moving on, 1985 to 86. Short production run. This was the end of it. This was the last tractors then that were produced by Chamberlain. And when we look at these now, we see a John Deere, basically with a funny looking cab on it. It's basically, the likes of your 4000 series, your 4040s and that. When you look at them, that's what they look like. So the 90 series, the 4090 was the first of them at 100 horsepower. So it again had your 5.9 litre John Deere engine from your 3140 and your 3640. 510 of those produced. Your 4290 then, 118 horsepower, turbocharged, 5.9 litre. So 85, 86. So when you look at the John Deere 3650, it was, the early ones were 112 and then there were 118 horsepower. So yeah, they would have had the same engine pretty much, the turbocharged 5.9 litre engine. There was 270 of those made. And then moving on up the range again, 4490 at 137 horsepower, and now we're into the 7.6 litre. So the famous 7.6 litre engine in the 50 series John Deere's, in the 4050s. So the likes of your 4650s with the 7.6 litre John Deere engine. So the 4490 at 137 horsepower, 7.6 litre John Deere engine, was 250 of them made. And then the very last and the largest in the 90 series was the 4690 at 163 horsepower, 1985 to 1986 again, the 7.6 litre John Deere 4650 basically. You're looking at the same tractor pretty much with a different cab. You didn't have the SG2 cab that would have been out in the John Deeres at the time. So that's the roundup basically. So they, again, the 90 series had the 12-speed partial power shift as well. 12 forward, 4 reverse from what I remember, yeah. So that's it. Now, there was a few tractors in between. So you had the likes of the Cane Lander, which was a bespoke high-rise tractor, high ground clearance for use in cane fields. That would have been primarily, I suppose, known in Australia, up around Queensland, the Queensland area and places like that where it's tropical, and there was a lot of sugar cane and stuff grown. I'm probably missing one or two, but look at basically that is the range. The 1890 series finished it up. And from what I can see, they're a fantastic tractor. I'd love to, next time I go down to Australia, I'm definitely going to look one up and get a spin on one someplace. Fantastic country. I love Australia. Not too keen on the cities and that. Once you get out of the cities, out into the bush, out into the sticks, that's when you see the real Australia. Fantastic, yeah. So it's summer down there and it's raining here, so I'm not at all jealous. So that's it. That's going to wrap it up. That's the range. If anybody in Australia has one, or if you're driving one, if you're still using one, if you're restoring one, if you're doing anything one, if you have a little bit more information to add on. Now, if I got anything wrong there, or if I left anything out, or don't shout at me, European. So, yeah, just bear with me. Yeah, so that's it, lads. Thanks for watching. I'm going to come back with a third Chamberlain video, and the next video is going to be a little bit shorter. I'm just going to talk briefly about the implements that they made, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the John Deere buyover and the eventual demise of the company, and how it affected things down in Australia, in Welshpool and places like that, and what the feeling was. So if anyone can help me out on that, if you were working for Chamberlain at the time, if you were in a dealership, if you were in the factory when John Deere took it over, or when it closed down in the mid-80s, what the feeling was. If you don't want to put it in the comments, you can email me, or contact me on the website or something. Just drop me a little note if you have anything to share at all. It's helpful because there's not a wild amount of stuff online. So that's it. Yeah, thanks for watching. I will be back this Sunday with Massey Ferguson 100 series. Thank you very much for watching.